Hello there. Thank you for joining us on the last edition of Journalists Hangout this week. I am Bukola Samuel Wemimo. Today on the program, INEC vows not to tolerate politicians holding its officials hostage as police move to ensure violence-free elections, make arrests and mop up weapons. I'll be hanging out with Babajide Kolade Otitoju and Janet Mba Folabi. Journalists Hangout starts now. Thank you for staying with us. It is not an understatement to say that the antics of politicians and their struggle for power has turned polling officials in Nigeria to endangered species. But the Independent National Electoral Commission INEC has warned politicians that taking its staff hostage and forcing them to declare winners of elections will no longer be tolerated. Speaking in Abuja on security for Saturday's governorship and state assembly election, INEC Chairman Professor Mahmoud Yakub said the Commission will be forced not to issue certificates of return in such circumstances. And as citizens brace up for the challenge of electing 29 state governors and 991 members of houses of assembly across the country, the police have assured of violence-free polls on Saturday, and it will be time to walk the talk. Thank you for staying with us. Okay, we'll take a short break now, and when we return, the conversation will start off. Thank you for staying with us. If you've just joined us, it's Journalists Hangout, and it's the last edition before tomorrow's election. Babajide Kolade Otitoju, you're welcome. Janet Mba Afolabi, you're welcome. And happy International Women's Day, by the way.
Thank you. Today is our day.
It's our day.
It's a global day to celebrate women, their achievements, their plight, their fears, and their aspirations. Women have come a very long way.
A very long way.
Yes.
And we'll try as much as possible not to let Jide be left out as we celebrate.
Jide will feel left out because he has a wife, he has a daughter, he has a sister, so he's part of us.
It's part of the celebration.
I'm a woman at heart.
Okay, we'll try to remember that as we go along with the conversation. So, gentlemen and lady, our work is cut out for us today ahead of tomorrow's election. INEC has issued a warning to politicians not to hold its officials hostage. But as part of efforts to walk the talk, let's look at the antecedents that INEC has given during the presidential election. I'm starting with you, Jide. Is it enough to be confident in this warning issued by the INEC chairman that indeed it will carry out its threat if such incidents occur during the governorship election?
Well, I think INEC has done the right thing by letting these politicians know that it will amount to a waste of time to seize electoral officials and force them to declare them winners of those elections. There were reports of INEC officials being abducted, youth corps members being abducted, taken to known destinations with the intention of forcing them to compromise the process. And I keep saying it just shows that a lot of us are barbaric. Why should we go to that extent? Voters should decide who will rule them, who will be their leaders. Politicians shouldn't force themselves on the voters. But this is what we are seeing. We even saw a very shameful photograph of a senior police officer being dragged by thugs in this country. Being dragged on election day. So what's going on? If people have been appointed to conduct elections for us, we must trust them sufficiently. But to try to force them to declare us as winners when we could not get the voters to vote for us, it's an aberrant behavior, and it has to be condemned. I'm happy that even the British High Commission issued a fresh warning saying that anyone found to have incited the Nigerian people to violence in the course of these elections would be punished through visa restriction or even asset forfeiture. So, but that's not enough. Our own laws should also be able to punish these aberrant politicians, because their behavior puts us to shame as a people. You can't be beating up UCOM members. You can't be killing ad hoc staff of INEC. You can't be attacking soldiers on election day just because you are desperate to win. It shouldn't be a life and death affair. Elections should be like carnivals. Election days should be days when you and I will be happy that yes, the power that we have in our hands, we have an opportunity to exercise that power. Once we elect people, they go to Abuja. There's little we can do about their behaviors, but we have that power to determine those who go to represent us. And no one should take that power off the electorate by force. So that is the message from INEC. It has taken too long for INEC to underline this, because I know that in past elections that happened. But going forward, they should realize that if they force a collation officer to declare them winner of an election, they are not going to get the certificate of return. And if you don't have the certificate of return, that means your victory can still be, the result can still be upturned in favor of your opponent. But once you have the certificate of return, it's only a court that can take it off you.
I'm still curious as to whether we can, actually depend on INEC to carry out this threat. I recall during the election, Okota is still very fresh in our memory, when one voter was complaining about how they were attacked. The first two times, police operatives were there to repel the attacks, but the third time, the police themselves had to run. And indeed, one person was apprehended, but later released yet again. So have these cases, and we can count quite a number of them that occurred across the Federation, have they been investigated, to a point where we can say that INEC is actually serious about the threat it's issuing to election riggers and those who would try to manipulate the process by holding INEC officials hostage?
There are about 323 persons that have been arrested by the police. That is official. And for electoral offenses, and they are undergoing investigation. I'm sure some of them the reports may have come from INEC, the compilation, throughout the Federation. Having said that, INEC is talking tough. Police is acting tough. So we're going to see by tomorrow or Sunday what is going to happen. The police is sending out 7 DIGs, including the first secretary, Kano. They are sending out 10 AIGs. They are also sending out 277 commissioners of police to various states of the Federation. So it's like this is war. We are ready for any eventuality, for any violence, hostility, attack, threats. We are ready. That's what the police action is saying. On INEC, saying they will not give the officers their certificates of return, that is a good threat, because that will deter whoever wants to now force an INEC officer to announce results. Forcing an INEC officer to announce results, for me, is not only barbaric, but primitive. Why go that backward just because you want to get a result? Why do you want to force yourself on the people? If you want to serve, it is not by force. Service is supposed to be free. It's supposed to be voluntary. It's not supposed to be by war. if you are genuinely going there to serve. But most people who are going into politics are not going there with the intention to serve the people. They're going there with the intention to serve their pockets, serve their person, their cronies, friends, and families. So that is why they want to do it by force. And they also want to use it as an investment. For them, politics is an investment, is business, is a game, but it's a game of good business. That's why many of them are like that. And this election, tomorrow's election, is going to take place in 29 states of the Federation, and about I think 991 House of Assembly seats are vacant, which they are going to contest for. Out of this, because today is International Women's Day, I'm going to quote the statistics of women who are going to take part in this election. 80 women are going in for governorship, and we have 1,525 women going for House of Assembly. That is a good starting point. Women in the past, they have been laid back, they have been spectators in a process that they are supposed to be participants. So somehow they have woken up, and today being their day, they will go out tomorrow, support their own, and vote for their own. But coming back to your question on INEC, I think is a good step. INEC has identified their areas of challenges. And INEC chairman, one of the conferences that he had after the election, said they are going to rectify. And one of those challenges, it's even arrival of material to polling units at 8 o'clock. Because timeliness is very important. They should show by leadership by example. If they get there on time, election will finish on time, and there will be no apprehension, there will be no hostility, there will be no annoyance. Because when people wait for too long, waiting for INEC officials to come and materials, they get easily agitated and there will be confusion. So we hope that tomorrow politicians will respect themselves. Although this election is an election of serious contention, this is an election where you are going to have the title defenders and the title challengers. Yes.
Interesting.
Interesting, very interesting. And that is why the police and INEC, they are coming out this strong, because they know that there are states that you can't do without violence. They always have that history of violence, and tomorrow it will be there.
And the flashpoints for tomorrow, by the way, are Zamfara, Kogi,
Kaduna,
Akwa Ibom, Kano,
even Bayelsa and Rivers.
Bayelsa and Rivers, as well. 323 today is quite a number. But do you have confidence that we'll see numbers in prosecution that will serve as a deterrent to election riggers and thugs in the future?
I think the figure is actually higher than that. Kano alone arrested 950 suspected political thugs, and they seized, the State Commissioner of Police and his men seized 720 brand new cutlasses, from the thugs who had been imported in inverted commas into the state. Clearly, look at those cutlasses, brand new cutlasses brought into Kano. If you look at the number of people picked up in Kano alone, then you will know that we are really in trouble. We need to do something about electoral violence, because when you look at other countries of the world, nobody goes to buy cutlasses just because of election.
Because of election.
It just shows how backward we are. And you would want to think that as we go on with every passing year, our processes will become much more sophisticated, to the point that rigging becomes almost impossible. Well, that's not the situation.
Yet.
That's not the situation. Rigging is still very much part of our electoral process, and it's such a massive shame that politicians are so desperate. They are so desperate, and the bulk of the rigging, I pity people lined up in the sun, and then they come out and say, the election was free and fair. Because the bulk of the rigging is done at the level of collation.
Before we begin to talk about how elections are rigged, shouldn't prosecution be ending with naming and shaming? Perhaps if we knew those who are perpetrating electoral violence, election rigging.
That is what the Emir of Kano suggested. But you know, in our kind of country, it will be difficult. People, even when they are arrested, an instruction could come from Abuja that they should be brought to Abuja. That's where they will be released. Once powerful people are involved, or once they are discovered to be thugs of power people in the society, they get released. So the Emir of Kano is saying, look, we shouldn't just arrest these these bad boys. We should get them to name the sponsors of violence so that we can serve justice to sponsors of violence as well. It's not arresting these boys is not the solution, because the same sponsors of violence, they've got deep pockets. They will find money. Even if you keep those ones in detention, they will recruit other guys that will do the job of snatching ballot boxes or chasing people away from where they know they are certain to lose. So things have to change. In my view, it's about time we had a tribunal to try electoral offenses, because if we subject the trial of these guys from Kano alone, 950, and then the 323 that the
police PRO.
I read it. What I had been following what was going on in individual states. If we merge it with what we have in Kano, we are not even talking about
other states.
Those who will be arrested tomorrow. Because people will be arrested tomorrow.
Of course.
This election,
I want to be disappointed
this election,
tomorrow.
The stakes are higher because politics is local. The stakes, in my view, are even higher than the presidential election. A lot of our people were really not bothered about presidential election. But for the governorship, that's when they want to actually kill people and do all that, because the president is far away from them. But the governorship election, if we need to watch all of those states, Ogun State, Kaduna, and the rest of those states, Akwa Ibom, you will see clearly that the level of violence would even be higher than what we had in the presidential election. So we really should expect that more people will be arrested. Then how do we serve justice to them? Through our regular courts. Our regular courts are already saturated.
Overwhelmed.
And the judges are overwhelmed. So a tribunal to try electoral offenders, this had been suggested for years. But we've not really done anything or given it a serious thought. Every year we arrest these guys and they get released. You do not read that justice is served to them. And we need to see evidence that justice is served to these people, because that's the only way we can deter them. Otherwise, this will just be an endless cycle.
What about you, Janet? You think,
I think that
special tribunals are the way to go?
Yes, and there should be accelerated hearing. It's not the kind of hearing that you delay and keep delaying, because justice delayed may not even be gotten eventually. And coming back to these figures, the electoral offenders, I'm wondering why, if the police actually had more than what they released, why are they giving us a lower figure? If in Kano, like Otitoju said, there is 900 and something, why didn't they include it?
Initially, they first said 103. If we check, they first said 103. Later on, they said 323. But I'm saying that the Kano State Police Commissioner addressed the press and said, these are the people that we have arrested.
That's what I'm saying.
Perhaps they've not reconciled the figures.
Yes,
that's what I'm saying.
Because the same Umba, the first, even last week, we even discussed it based on the figure that he gave. The same Umba had said 103. I mean, this is a gradual process. More the figure will rise as the days go on. So I'm sure that they will discover that there are
There's
more
actually
people
more-
arrested
Yes.
across the states.
Because things like this should not give room to conflicting figures of offenders, and that alone in itself makes the whole situation look very curious and suspicious. And you were asking about the tribunal. I think there should be a special tribunal. If we have so many offenders, they need to be tried speedily to serve as deterrent, because those who are used, they volunteered to be used. I'm sure they were not compelled.
And do you agree with Jide as well that our system is not transparent enough to allow naming and shaming so that it will be discouraged?
Of course, the system is not transparent enough to allow naming and shaming. Even in police, in the police force, when they arrest maybe a top government functionary and they discover so much, by the time they get to the police station, the DPO say, okay, leave it, I will handle it. From there, the case begins to meet a dead end. So the police officer is discouraged. By the time he meets another case like that, he will just hands off and begin to look. In Abuja, there were closed circuits everywhere. Closed circuits on the streets. One of the IGs mounted it. In the night, one after the other, all of these CCTV were removed because they didn't want the cameras to capture big men in their movements in the night, in their activities in the night. So they removed it and made sure that up to tomorrow, there is no camera on the streets of Abuja.
Interesting. Nigeria. Now, Jide, I'm looking forward to you taking us through how election ballot papers are counted, collated, and when they get to INEC office before onward transfer to the headquarters in Abuja, I mean for the presidential election now. How are elections rigged?
Let me tell you one of the fantastic tricks that politicians use that the rest of us are not aware of. The politicians will go and print fake result sheets. If you remember in 2015, Amechi was saying that he would not allow the election to take place in Rivers until he sees the result sheet. He's a Rivers man. He knows that over the years, they've not been doing the election. People just line up in the rain for nothing, and then they go and write figures. So it is, once you have the result sheet, the original result sheet of INEC, then you can determine the outcome
results
of the election. So what they do is they will go and print the fake result sheet that looks like INEC's result sheet. That is the one that they will take to the collation officer, bribe the collation officer to give them the original INEC result sheet. They will exchange that original with the fake. So the INEC official will use that fake result that agents and others will sign on. You will discover that politicians are always looking for data about PVC collection at ward level, at local government level. Why are they doing that? Because they want to be able to sit in their rooms and write figures
results
that will match the number of PVCs collected. If they don't have that information and they write the results as they like to do, if it doesn't match, of course there will be problems and the voting in that area could be cancelled. So once they have that information and armed with the original INEC result sheets that they've been given by a collation officer that must have been compromised or forced to part with it at gunpoint, then they will go and write their figures. At the ward level, at the ward level and local government level, what happens is the collation officers at the ward level will take the result sheet to the local government level. There is no provision in INEC guidelines that says that agents of political parties at ward level must authenticate a result You know, this one is done its own job at the level of the polling units. Those are collected at from polling units, handed over to the ward collation officer. Ward collation officer takes it to the local government collation office. Now, it is at that point that it is substituted. You get the point that I'm making? And it's substituted because there is no provision in INEC guidelines that all of those agents should come and authenticate the result at that level.
That point.
So
How can that process be monitored? Can we have cameras? Can we have the Electoral Act adjusted to the effect that cameras are following them?
Because this is the way it happens. I'm sure a lot of them will be swearing at me. I'm saying, because this is the way they rig. Once we've discovered that this is what happens, then we have to find a way to stop it from happening. You can imagine politicians bribing collation officers at ward level to the tune of 250,000 in some cases. You know how much you are going to spend in the end if you have to bribe people that much. But this is what happens. So we substituted. You can't bring all the ward agents of political parties. You can't bring them to the local government collation point to authenticate the results that have been released. Because at that point, it's been substituted. So, and nobody also authenticates signatures. You now, if I know your signature, if anyone brings, and you are an agent of my political party, if anyone brings a result signed by, purportedly signed by you, I can say, no, this is not Buki's signature. But nobody really does that. So they are capitalizing on the fact, on the loopholes in INEC guidelines. So once the person who's been compromised, the collation officer who's been compromised at that level, he just passes it in. It says true. It says true. Because sometimes the question you ask is, when they say, oh, this is not the actual result, this is rigging, then people will say, didn't the agents sign? But they don't know that at the level of collation, at the local government level, and even ward level, that results are capable of, that INEC officials are capable of substituting results. Well, that's what people don't know. But this is happening.
It reminds me of this video on YouTube where, I don't want to mention the name of the state now, there's an INEC officials pointing out to collation officers that total accredited vote, total votes cast is not tallying with total rejected votes. That rejected votes and total votes cast must tally. That they should go and sort it out. And that is where Nigerian political observers are raising eyebrows that that is a purported election rigging video. But then again, a returning electoral officer can say there's a discrepancy somewhere. You have to reconcile it. Does it necessarily amount to collation officers being complicit in the election rigging? I wonder if you watched that video.
I watched it. And that's why INEC is going to organize a supplementary election in 14 states. That video, it's a woman. It was a woman in the video. I don't know if it's the same video. But she mentioned, she gave details of how she was asked to compromise. And I salute her courage for doing that. There is no doubt that there is substitution at some point. But the problem lies even with the parties, the smaller parties, who do not have polling agents. You know, they're supposed to have agents at even the smallest polling units. And many of them cannot afford to have. So only the big parties have those agents. So for them, anything goes. There's nobody to actually monitor. So for the two big parties, it's about who outsmarts the other in rigging. Because the relationship between elections...
They are both into the game.
Yes, the relationship between elections and rigging is very powerful. And for the more desperate person or party, it's even more powerful, you know, the rigging. And rigging is corruption. Rigging is enemy of development. It is deceit, it's dishonesty, and that's why the country...
barbaric.
Yes, and primitive. And that's why the country is still gravitating in one place and not going forward. So they both rig. And some of them have people who have mastered the art of rigging. Rigging is not just rigged by anybody.
Not there are those writing figures.
Yes, there are those who have mastered the art. And those are the people who are paid to be there, and they know that they are being, like, You know, everybody has a role to play. So their major role is you are going to be the rigging machine.
Yeah, the principalities.
And have powers in rigging. So they do it.
So should collation officers, because they swear to an oath of neutrality, should they now be swearing by Shango or Ogun? All right, before you answer that, gentleman and lady, let's take a break. You're watching Journalists Hangout. We'll be right back. Thank you for staying with us on Journalists Hangout. We've been looking at electoral violence, election rigging, how it can be discouraged. Thank you for following the conversation. My guest, of course, is Babajide Kolade Otutoju and Janet Mba Afolabi. Thank you for your patience, gentlemen of the press. So, how do we discourage, ahead of tomorrow, how can we discourage political thuggery?
You know, when you hear that we've mobilized tens of thousands of policemen and soldiers, you still see some irresponsible boys in Bayelsa dragging a senior police officer in broad daylight. So you ask yourself that, who are the people protecting the voters on election day? When you hear of ballot boxes being snatched by political thugs, you ask yourself that, where are the policemen or soldiers that President Buhari said should shoot on sight? Because I've not seen ballot box snatchers being shot on sight.
Not at
I've
all.
not read
The
about
videos that we've seen.
Yes. Instead, it's innocent people being killed. Look at the young boy who came into Kogi State from who was killed on election day. You know, because of unnecessary violence that Riyadh is said in the course of the election in Kogi. Now, part of how we can stop violence is for politicians not to be overly greedy. Because this winner takes all attitude of politicians is what breeds violence, nothing else. Look at in Kogi now, my former state. Look at the governor was said to have told his aides that whoever does not deliver his area should not bother to come to work. That in itself, or to not bother to come to work on Monday, that in itself will breed violence.
It shows the desperation.
Because those aides office, including caretaker local government chairmen that he has appointed because he's scared to do elections, they would pile pressure on people in their constituencies. They will use security agents. They will beat up people. They will set loose the thugs in areas where they think that they don't have advantage. Because someone is already on their neck that you must deliver your area, otherwise consider your job gone. People shouldn't be issuing such threats. I think President Buhari needs to talk to some of the governors who want us to believe that they are close to him, because some of their actions are just condemnable. You can't be piling pressure on people because of election. Elections will come and go. So it's part of what we need to do. Then, of course, once it is instituted that if you go to disrupt election in an area, you've merely wasted your time, because the election will be conducted fresh. What politicians also do is, areas where they think their opponents are very strong and they know they don't stand a chance of winning, they will send thugs to that area, knowing that INEC by its rules will cancel
Elections
in that area. You know, or they will render the ballots in that area null and void. So it's now a strategy. Oh, let me block him. Let me stop him from winning here, so that his numbers will go down. If potential voters could give 12,000 to my opponent in a particular part of town, I will go there and make sure that they don't vote. I've denied him of potential 12,000 votes. Then my own area, I can sit back and score huge votes that will give me an unassailable lead. This is what they do. So we can actually discourage that by instituting, by making it clear to politicians that, look, if you disrupt elections somewhere, we'll do a fresh election there. Instead of saying that you are cancelling
The elections in its entirety.
Yes, you're cancelling the ballots because the area you saw evidence of voter intimidation or violence. It doesn't help anybody. In fact, you are rewarding the aggressor. In my view, you are rewarding the aggressor by allowing that kind of rule to stand, because politicians are routinely now exploiting it. Those battles that you are seeing in Rivers State is across the camps of the two big political parties. This one will go and attack the other people where they are strong. The other one too will say, no, these people must not score high votes here. They will go and disrupt elections there. That's why some of the biggest local governments in Rivers State, elections didn't hold this last time. 6 local governments, they didn't do elections. So how can we go on? And then we've identified some states that are notorious for electoral violence. Why don't we find a way to secure those states so that people can vote in peace? We need to do that. Because watching some of the videos from Rivers, I was disappointed. I said, instead of pouring policemen and soldiers to some states that we know have relative peace in election time, we should have concentrated a lot of our energies on that perennial...
But this conversation was held before the presidential election, and INEC gave all the assurances at that time that it was prepared, security was also in place for the election. But so we're talking about the same thing a day to the governorship election.
But it's apparent that INEC was not really prepared for those elections in terms of security. When you talk of security, it's not even security for for INEC officials alone. You talk of security for even journalists covering the election. You talk of security for the voters themselves, women and youth who are there, the disabled, the pregnant, the old, the elderly. These are also people who need serious security. Bayelsa and Rivers, they have history of violence because of the presence of militants in those states. There is so much weapon, more sophisticated than that of even the policemen who are going. I also watched that video where that Deputy Commissioner of Police, Federal SAS, was picked like a fly. And I had to send the picture to a police officer to say, please confirm this rank. I think this is a fake video, fake picture. He said it's real. It says real before I used it. And the man was helpless. Where were other police officers, for God's sake? He could have been killed.
Yes.
They came up with all manners of stories.
And that he was already about to be beheaded.
And they could have done that because they are youth. You know, youth, their head, they hot. Permit me to use that word.
It's a mob.
But it speaks to the level of desperation of our politicians.
They are desperate.
The riverine part of Bayelsa. The riverine part of Bayelsa, that is where we have violence all the time.
Because they can easily escape into the waters and not many security officers can chase them when it comes to swimming in the sea. You know, not many of them.
Like
they swim like fish and they can go on the ground for 15 minutes, their heads will not be up. And because there is also rivalry between these militants, there are a lot of militant groups in Bayelsa and Rivers. There is rivalry among them, and different groups are supporting different politicians, and they have different leaders. So it's just for a command to come from a camp, maybe the commander of a camp, and then the boys will go to war. They don't even question their commanders. All they know is go out. And because they are intoxicated not by drink, they are intoxicated by their higher weapons. They just go into their armory and flush out whatever is there and move to the street. And they know that average Nigerian will be scared when they see those kind of, the one that they wear like chains, you know, in the creeks. Even some policemen will run, will take a duck, because their lives first. And some of these policemen, they also have their biases. They are also prejudiced. They also have people they support. So they may look the other way while violence is going this way, to allow the person they have sympathy for to have an upper hand.
Let's even assume the neutrality of the policemen.
No, they can't be neutral.
That's why I said let's assume. But let's look at, you know, the danger of the situation itself. I keep referring to Okota. The lady who spoke to TVC said Twice they came and they were repelled, but by the third time, there was just one policeman on duty, and he was overwhelmed. He couldn't have taken on the assailants on his own. So let's assume the neutrality of the policemen. Let's look at how this goes back to the monetization of the electoral process. INEC put in a cap of 1 billion naira on election spending. Even if that's the limit to what can be spent on election in 2019, Jide, it's quite a lot. It's a humongous sum compared to the level of poverty, that still abounds in the land.
The devil is actually in the enforcement. How do you enforce it? How do you enforce a kind of ceiling on campaign spending? In our country, in our kind of country, it's extremely difficult to enforce. And you know it. Because the government of the day, for example, they are the ones in power. They have power. How do you compel them to do just that? And they want to win the election. And if you cannot enforce it against the ruling party, it will be difficult for the for other parties to agree, to abide by that stipulation. It's extremely difficult. But in my view, it is not even. In my view, what we need the most is to improve our electoral process so that you and I can genuinely elect our leaders. Not find ourselves in a situation like, oh, whether we like it or not, this person will win an election. Because it's still happening in our nation, and it shows that we are backward. I've given examples of South Africa that when ANC lost the municipal elections, in areas where some of the greatest anti-apartheid heroes were born, they didn't, because of that, say, no, they are going to resort to violence. They accepted it. That's the way it should be. Laws, we have laws, but we don't enforce our laws against the big people in our society. You saw that minister from Botswana who was coming into the country from Dubai. And right there at the airport, they arrested him and put handcuffs in his hands. He was saying, why are you embarrassing me before my family member? Why are you embarrassing me? Well, they were not going to listen to him. They took him away in handcuffs. That is the way we should be treating our big men. It shouldn't be separate laws for the rich and separate laws for the poor. Anyone who infringes on the law or laws of our country should be served justice. Honestly, if we start doing that, things will change. And we must reform, we must continually reform our balloting process. We must, because I believe there is a relationship between it and even good governance. If you know that whatever happens, you will win the election, you will not wholeheartedly serve the people because you know the people can't remove you from office. You understand?
But in
you are
Nigeria,
a governor,
that is not the case. If you know that you win the election and you will not rig, your opponent will rig.
That's not, you didn't hear me clearly.
Okay.
I said, if you think that the people cannot stop you from earning re-election because you know that you will rig your way,
Okay.
you will not feel that you are responsible to the people. You will not wholeheartedly serve the people, because even if you don't serve them, you can still win the election. We've seen politicians boast like that now, that look, you can't stop me from being re-elected. So that is the point. But we should be able to stop politicians who have not served the people from being re-elected. And that will only happen when we reform our electoral process and the fidelity of our elections are no longer in doubt. You and I will be able to say, yes, it is the person who deserves to win that won. But looking at our elections, the House of Reps elections, senatorial elections and all that, there are still grumblings all over the place that, oh, this person did not deserve to win, and people are heading to court. So, but a time will come, and a time should come, when our elections will be like elections in developed countries of the world. That whatever happens, it is the verdict of the people that prevails. Not that someone will say because he has militants or that he has got so much money, he can go and compromise INEC staff and then he will win the election, or put a gun to the neck of a coalition officer and force a coalition officer to announce him as winner. Our election, the process should be transparent. If it's electronic, it should be done in such a way that nobody can hack it. And you and I should be able to know by the morning of the next day who the president that we have elected is. India, the biggest democracy in the world, if they do an election today, within 24 hours, they will know who has won. That's what I look forward to for my country, because every time I remember that we still haven't put election rigging behind us, it makes my blood boil, honestly.
Now, this situation, if we assume that that is what is going to happen tomorrow, political thuggery, is going to impact on the numbers in voter turnout.
Of course, if people are intimidated, they are frightened, bomb is blown, is detonating here and there, gunshots, people will first run for their lives. Nobody wants to die. Those who want to die will not enjoy the benefits of this country. So I want people to live so that when this country gets better, they will also benefit from it. The character of democracy is democracy. And the character of election should be transparent, credible, fair, and free and fair. If we look at elections from the 60s, you see that we are evolving. The violence is reducing compared to what it used to be in the days of the the action group, not ACN, the action group. Yes, of the Awolowo at that time. Those were the days of wear tear, that houses were burnt down, people were killed, and it was really crude. It was a very crude manner of showing violence. But when Shagari came in, the election of Shagari was not that violent, although it did not, his reign did not last. And then we had long reign of the military. So those transitional period that Babangida kept saying, 1990, that never came, made a lot of people to have a different mindset about politics. Many of them were laid back. Nobody wanted to come out because they didn't trust Babangida enough to come out, spend their money, and then win the election. And that was why a lot of young people came out at that time and joined the two parties that Babangida created. One was like a socialist, one was like a Republican. SDP was more of a socialist party, and NRC was more of a Republican party. So people moved along this line. And then the level of violence was not as much, like it was in the 60s. Then the climax was the 1993 election of Abiola. That was the real violence, because everybody were united in supporting Abiola. And then you know the story till 1999. Rigging may have been the reason why the 1993 election had the 2003 election had the highest number of voters who turned out. If you look at the graphics, you see that that was the highest, because people are now analyzing it and said, how come from that time election voters turnout kept dropping and dropping and dropping, and even dropping the more now?
Yeah, in 2019.
Yes. If you look at the graph is like that. Could it be rigging? Were those rigging machines put at work to allow those that wanted to be?
The figures. Ogun State, the total votes cast was higher than the number of registered voters.
Yes.
Yes, it was one of the grounds upon which Buhari contested the verdict of INEC right up to Supreme Court. And I was at Supreme Court on the day that verdict was given to cover it. The number of voters, the vote cast was higher than number of voters registered for Ogun State. So that should tell you that, look, they simply just wrote this figures.
And it happened even in this election,
yes,
where party agents were complaining after declaration of results that there are discrepancies in the number of accredited voters and the total number of votes cast.
And that's why there's going to be a supplementary election. The INEC chairman also raised it that they noticed that, and because of ballot box snatching and card readers, they took them away. Voters register were taken away.
If we use card readers faithfully, rigging will reduce drastically, and some of the figures that we are used to, we won't get those figures because it takes time to even authenticate.
The biometrics.
One person, you could spend 10 minutes on one person. So, and if we say that card readers, we want to use only card readers, no more incident forms, then so be it. But we saw in this last election that in some cases, card readers were bypassed and people were just voting normally. But in some states, we saw recs who decided that where they did not use card readers, that the votes cast in those areas will be cancelled. That's the sort of consistency that we want. If we say we want only card readers, so be it across Nigeria. Across Nigeria.
But then again, a lot of people will be disenfranchised when the card reader doesn't read their biometrics.
Then they should have a standby.
What they said is that where the card reader malfunctions, the election will be held the next day. If they can't solve the problem, if the IT support people can't solve the problem, the election will be held the next day. So that by the next day they will have solved the problem and people will be able to vote. But to say, oh, card reader here, we use it here, in another place, we will not use it, that is not right.
It's inconsistent. We could go on and on. I wanted to look at the figure of, registered voters in Lagos, 6 million, but at the presidential election, we had just about 1-point-something million in voter turnout.
We talked briefly about it yesterday, and I blame the APC leaders, APC mobilizers, I blame them. If they work very hard, they do this, their house-to-house, get out the vote as they do in America. If they do it well, on election day, their volunteers are very active and they get people out of their homes, their supporters to go and vote. The figure will rise. I predict that the figure will be higher for the governorship election. Yes, because they have realized too that they didn't do enough work. Some people will be given money to mobilize, they will not spend the money, or they will go and keep it under their beds. They will now say people didn't come out. That's what is happening.
Yeah, I think more people will come out for this governorship and House of Assembly.
There's greater determination.
We hope that the figures will improve.
Because if you don't deliver, it will clearly show. If you collected money and you didn't mobilize, it will show. Unlike the presidential.
So we're optimistic about the governorship election tomorrow, not just for Lagos, but across the Federation. Don't forget, vote, don't fight tomorrow. That's all on Journalist Hangout. Join us again next week for another episode of the program. You can also watch Journalist Hangout on YouTube at youtube.com/TVC News Nigeria. Our feedback channel is Journalist Hangout at tvcnews.tv. I am Bukola Samuel Wemimo. Bye for now, and God bless Nigeria.